The Red Mesa country had a way of swallowing sound. Out there, where the desert rolled wide and the wind scraped across the sandstone ridges, even a man's own footsteps seemed to disappear before he finished taking them. Nathaniel Redhorse had grown used to that kind of quiet. He carried it the way some men carried a rifle, close, heavy, and always on the edge of memory. At 30 years old, he owned the largest horse ranch within 100 miles. Folks in the nearby town of Saints Crossing said he knew horses better than he knew people. And most days, Nathaniel figured they were right. He could break a stallion with nothing but a steady gaze and a soft whistle. Yet he hadn't held a real conversation longer than a minute or two since the fire 5 years earlier. The fire that took everyone he'd ever loved. His father, his mother, and his little sister. It had happened on a Christmas Eve. That night still clung to him, like the smell of smoke on old leather. So he buried Christmas deep in the soil of his heart, swearing he'd never let the season breathe on his land again. No pine wreaths, no lanterns, no laughter. The Red Horse Ranch sat dark every December, a place where winter was nothing but wind and silence. Nathaniel lived alone in the big adobe house his father built. The rooms were wide, the ceilings high, the old beams strong enough to outlast storms but without voices, without warmth. The place felt carved from stone. Some evenings, standing on the porch, he almost heard the ghosts of his family moving inside. Then the wind would shift, and the world would go quiet again. It was on one such winter evening, close to sunset, when Hank Tully, the old ranch foreman, rode in from town. Hank had worked for the Red Horse family longer than Nathaniel had been alive. The wrinkles on his face were deep as dry creek beds, and the limp in his gait never left him, not even in summer. "Nate," Hank called, sliding off his bay gelding. "Someone's waiting to see you." Nathaniel didn't look up from the saddle he was oiling. "I'm not taking on any new riders this season, Hank." "It ain't a rider," Hank said carefully. "It's a woman. And 2 boys." Nathaniel paused. "What for?" "Work," Hank replied. "She's asking for work and a roof." Nathaniel finally lifted his eyes. The sun was low, copper-colored, slanting across the yard. A woman stood by the corral fence, holding the hands of 2 small boys. Dust clung to her skirts, and her coat was threadbare. Her hair, dark, long, messy in the wind, framed a face that was too young for the hardness in her eyes. "Name's Maria," Hank added, lowering his voice. "Says she's looking for a chance to start over. Heard we needed help with the winter chores." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He knew that name, knew the rumors that blew through town like tumbleweeds, rumors of a saloon girl, of bad company, of a gambler who left her with twins and nothing else. He didn't want trouble on his land, didn't want reminders of weakness, mistakes, or messy pasts. He already carried enough of those. Still, the 2 boys caught his attention. They stood quiet, close to each other, their brown eyes wide with the kind of fear kids shouldn't know. One clutched a ripped blanket. The other's boots didn't match. Nathaniel set the saddle aside and walked over. Maria straightened her shoulders but kept her gaze steady. "Sir," she began softly, "I'm not asking for charity. I'll work. Harder than most. All I need is a place for my boys to sleep and a chance to prove we ain't trouble." Nathaniel looked at her, hands raw from cold and travel, but steady. She didn't tremble, didn't plead. She simply stood there like someone who had spent too long being judged and no longer feared it. "How'd you end up in Saints Crossing, why?" he asked. She hesitated. "A bad road, a worse man. But that's behind me." She glanced at her children. "I just want to raise them someplace where I can hold my head up." There was no shame in her tone, only a tired honesty that struck him deeper than he expected. Nathaniel crossed his arms. "I know who you are, Miss Cortez, and I know what folks say." Her face tightened, but she didn't drop her gaze. Folks been saying things about me since I was 17, sir. It don't matter anymore. All that matters is keeping my boys fed and out of the cold. You give me the dirtiest jobs you got. I'll take 'em." For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind brushed past, carrying the faint bell sound of horses in the distance. Nathaniel looked again at the boys. 2 children with no winter coats, shivering but silent, clinging to their mother's skirt like she was the only thing in the world they trusted. He felt something shift inside his chest, small, reluctant, but real. "You'll work dawn to dusk," he said finally. "Stalls, laundry, firewood, and you'll stay in the old bunkhouse near the east pasture." Maria nodded quickly. "We're grateful, sir, truly." "This doesn't mean I trust you," he added sharply. "I don't expect you to," she replied, lowering her head. "All I expect is a chance." Her voice echoed a soft, uncertain "thank you," their voices barely more than whispers. Nathaniel cleared his throat and stepped back, trying to push away the warmth creeping into that cold place he had lived in for so long. "Get them settled, Hank," he ordered. "We start early." As he watched the small family walk toward the bunkhouse, shadows stretching long across the yard, Nathaniel felt the old quiet settle around him again. Only this time, it didn't feel quite the same. Something new had entered the Red Horse Ranch, something soft, fragile, and entirely unwelcome. But it was here now, and the winter wind, for once, didn't seem strong enough to blow it away. Morning on the Red Horse Ranch always came cold, even colder for anyone living in the east bunkhouse. The little adobe building hadn't been lived in for years, and the night winds from Red Mesa found every crack they could. Still, when Hank Tully stopped by at first light, he found smoke rising from its chimney. Inside, Maria Cortez was already awake. She had folded her thin blanket neatly, swept the dirt floor, and was tying her hair back, while her boys finished the last crumbs of a stale biscuit they'd shared. The twins, Mateo and Marco, looked up when Hank stepped in, their faces still full of sleep, but already alert, like pups learning a hostile world. "You folks up early," Hank said. Maria nodded with a determined calm. "Won't make no sense to start a new life if we're late the first morning." Hank chuckled softly. "Good answer." Then he motioned toward the door. "Come on, Nathaniel wants you down at the stables." Maria placed her hands gently on the shoulders of her boys. "Stay close to the bunkhouse. No wandering. I'll be right back." The twins obeyed without argument, something Hank noticed with quiet approval. The stables stretched long and low across the yard, their wood dark with age and morning frost. Nathaniel was already inside, mucking out a stall as if he hadn't slept at all. He didn't look up when Maria entered. "You're late," he said. "I came as fast as I could," she replied evenly. "You'll need to come faster." The words struck like a stone, but Maria didn't bristle. She had been spoken to much worse in her past, by men whose tempers swung like broken saloon doors. Compared to them, Nathaniel's voice was cold. Yes, but not cruel. Just guarded. "Show me what to do," she said. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "Stalls need cleaning twice a day. Water 'em at dawn and dusk. Feed at the times I set. Not a minute off. These horses are bred Apache-style strong. Paced. Proud fly. They don't respond well to fear." "I don't scare easy," Maria answered. His eyes flicked to Sue, just briefly but enough to admit he'd heard something honest in her voice. He handed her a pitchfork. "We'll see about that." And so began the slow rhythm of her days. At first Maria worked stiff and cautious, unsure of how close to stand near a nervous mare, uncertain of the signals Nathaniel expected her to follow. But she learned fast she always had. Not from books or teachers, but from life, sharpening her edges. Before long she moved with steady confidence, clearing stalls, hauling fresh hay, changing out water buckets without flinching. Nathaniel watched, though he pretended not to. She never complained. Not when the winter wind bit through her thin sleeves. Not when the muck froze into hard clumps that took twice the strength to shove. Not even when a gelding spooked and nearly knocked her into a wall. She just got back up and kept going. Around noon, the twins wandered to the stable doorway, peeking inside with wide curiosity. "Don't come in unless I say," Maria warned, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Horses can be dangerous if you surprise them." Nathaniel glanced at the boys. They stood side by side like mirror images, each holding the other's hand as if afraid to let go. But they were polite, quiescent, respectful. "Boys," he said with a nod. They answered in unison. "Keith." Something amused him, then just a flicker in the eyes, gone before it could reach his face. The afternoon stayed cold, but the work warmed Maria's blood. When the sun dropped behind the mesa, Nathaniel finally stepped back from the last stall. "That'll do," he said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's heavier." "Yes, sir." As she turned to leave, her legs trembling from the long day, Nathaniel noticed the raw red patches on her palms. "You don't own gloves?" he asked. "No, sir." He frowned at that, though it wasn't anger this time, only something like discomfort. "Hank'll find you a pair." Maria shook her head quickly. "I don't need charity." "It ain't charity," Nathaniel said. "It's work gear. Can't do the job without it." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." The twins trailed behind her like two small shadows as she left the stable. Nathaniel watched them until the dusk swallowed their silhouettes. He wiped sweat from his brow and stepped into the cold air, wondering why the yard felt different now, less empty somehow. By the third day, the ranch hands began warming to Maria. She didn't gossip, didn't flirt, didn't ask for favors. She simply worked, head down, braids tucked behind her ears, moving through chores with a grace that surprised even her. Two of the cowboys, Big Tom and Reyes, were repairing a gate when the twins approached East Police with a hammer and nails. "We want to help," Mateo said. Tom blinked. "Help?" Marco nodded hard. "We work good." Reyes let out a soft laugh. "Well, look at that. Two little fellas ready to build the whole ranch." Maria hurried over, apologizing, but the men waved her off. "Nah, ma'am," Tom said kindly. "Boys like these ought to learn something useful." Nathaniel watched from horseback across the yard. He wasn't close enough to hear their voices, but he saw the way Maria stood half worried, half proud. He saw her fold her arms, rubbing warmth into her sleeves. He saw the thinness of her coat, the quiet strength in her stance. And for reasons he didn't understand yet, something old and frozen in him shifted again. Not much, barely enough to notice, but enough to remind him he was still human. That night, as Maria tucked her boys into the small bunkhouse bed, Mateo whispered, "Mama, do you think he likes us?" Maria smoothed his hair gently. "Mr. Red Horse, he's a man with a heavy heart. You just give him time." "Does time fix heavy hearts?" Marco asked. Maria paused. "Sometimes," she said softly. "Sometimes all a heart needs is a little kindness." Outside, the wind howled across the mesa, but inside their tiny cabin, the warmth of their small, hopeful voices lingered. Nathaniel, sitting alone in his silent house, felt that warmth too, though he would never admit it, not even to himself. The days drifted by in a hush of winter wind and quiet routine. Maria worked the stalls, hauled feed, washed clothes, stirred pots over the old stove. The twins gathered firewood, swept the bunkhouse, and followed the cowboys like two shy shadows. Nathaniel watched from a distance, never speaking more than necessary, yet somehow always near when trouble threatened. But as December wore on, Maria noticed something strange. The nearby ranches she'd passed on her way to Red Mesa's scraggly homesteads scattered along the canyon road, had begun to hang their winter lanterns and pine wreaths. Even Saints Crossing, poor as it was, strung cheap red ribbons along the saloon doors. Yet here, at the biggest ranch in miles, there wasn't a single sign of the season. No cedar garland, no candles, no tree, not even a stray ribbon carried by the wind. It was as if Christmas had been scrubbed clean off Nathaniel Redhorse's land. Maria tried to keep the thought to herself, but the twins didn't. "Mama," Mateo whispered one morning while she braided his hair. "Don't they got Christmas here?" Marco chimed in. "Even the saloon in Saints Crossing had lights." Maria hushed them gently. "Every place is different. Maybe Mr. Redhorse don't celebrate." But curiosity gnawed at her, and so did something deeper in ache she couldn't name. Watching a man so alone push away even the smallest spark of joy. It happened 3 days before Christmas Eve. The sun was dropping behind Red Mesa, turning the sandstone cliffs a deep crimson. Maria had finished the last of her chores and was heading back toward the bunkhouse when she saw Nathaniel near the corral, tying down a saddle blanket. He seemed tired in a way she had never seen before, shoulders drooped, jaw clenched, breath coming slow and heavy. Something in the air told her that asking now was dangerous. But the question rose anyway. "Bastis, Redhorse," she called gently. He didn't look up. "What is it?" She wiped her palms on her apron nervously. "I've been wondering why there ain't no Christmas things around the ranch. Not even a small candle." The moment the words left her mouth, she sensed the shift. Nathaniel froze, the saddle blanket clutched tight in his hands. When he lifted his head, the look in his eyes wasn't anger at first, it was something rawer, deeper, like a wound touched without warning. "Because I don't allow it," he said quietly. Maria swallowed. "May I ask why?" His voice snapped like the crack of a whip. "You may not." She stepped back a half pace, instinct tightening in her chest. But she didn't leave. There were times in her past when men's tempers made her shrink, hide, turn invisible. She refused to be that woman anymore. "Sir, you don't strike me as someone who hates joy without reason." Nathaniel turned sharply toward her, and for a heartbeat, she thought he might walk away. Instead, he stared, breathing hard, as if fighting something inside. Then he said it. "Christmas took my family." The words hung in the cold air, sharp as broken glass. Maria's lips parted, but she said nothing. Nathaniel's voice deepened, rough like boots dragging over gravel. 5 years ago, Christmas Eve. The night was cold, colder than this one. The fire started in the east barn, don't know how. My father ran inside to free the horses. My mother followed him. My sister, she tried to fetch water. He closed his eyes and his breath shook. I rode in from the canyon, but by the time I reached the ranch, the whole place was burning. Smoke everywhere, screams inside. I tried going in, but Hank dragged me back. Flames took everything, everything. Maria felt the weight of those words drop into her chest like a stone. Nathaniel swallowed hard. "So no, I don't want Christmas on my land. Not a candle, not a wreath, not a celebration, not ever." There was silence then, wide and painful, broken only by the distant cry of a lone coyote. Maria stepped closer, not daring to touch him, but standing near enough that he could feel she wasn't afraid. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No one should carry a hurt like that alone." Nathaniel scoffed, looking away. "I'm not alone. I have work, horses, winter." "None of those talk back," she murmured. He glanced at her sharply, but not unkindly. She held his gaze. "You ain't livin', Mr. Redhorse. You're just endurin'." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Maria drew a breath. "My past ain't clean. Folks said terrible things about me. Some of 'em true, some of 'em not. But none of it changes the fact that I'm still here, still treating. I reckon you deserve the same chance. Nathaniel's face softened barely. But enough. Good night, Miss Cortez, he said quietly, retreating from the weight of the conversation. But Maria watched him go, a deep ache blooming inside her. And that night, while the boys slept curled under one blanket, she sat on the edge of their bed and made a decision. A bold one. A foolish one, maybe. But one she felt in her bones. We're gonna help him remember what warmth feels like, she whispered to the dark. Mateo stirred. Mama? Hush, baby. Sleep. Tomorrow we got work to do. And so the plan began forming in her mind, a Christmas surprise made from scraps, kindness, and the hope that even the coldest heart could thaw when touched by a little light. Far across the ranch yard, Nathaniel stood in the doorway of his empty house, staring into the darkness. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not anger, but the faint, stubborn flicker of being seen. And somehow, that frightened him most of all. The morning after Nathaniel's confession dawned pale and cold. A thin crust of frost lay over the paddocks, glittering faintly beneath the early sun. Maria woke before her boys did, her mind already busy with thoughts of what she intended to do. She sat on the edge of the bunkhouse bed, pulling her coat tight around her shoulders as she stared at the bare wooden wall. Nathaniel Redhorse had lived 5 years with a wound that wouldn't close. She understood wounds like that. Past hurts had lived inside her too. Too quiet, sharp, unforgiving. She knew all too well how sorrow grew roots when left untouched. If she didn't try to break that soil apart, who would? By daybreak, she and the boys were creeping behind the bunkhouse, gathering whatever they could find. Mateo carried a rusted tin bucket. Marco dragged an old flour sack behind him. Their breath puffed into the air, their fingers numb but determined. What are we looking for, Mama? Marco whispered. Anything we can turn into Christmas, she said, scanning the barren ground. In the brush behind the horse pens, they found dry cedar clippings. In the old tack room, they came upon scraps of red cloth that had long ago wrapped saddle cinches. At the edge of the property, beneath a juniper tree half buried in old snow, Maria spotted a tiny cedar sapling, barely 3 feet tall, crooked but alive. She knelt in the snow, brushing the trunk gently. We'll borrow it for a while, she murmured. The boys helped her dig it out with their frozen hands, laughing when the roots finally gave way. They carried the little tree like a treasure, stumbling and giggling as snowflakes tipped off its sparse branches. Back in the bunkhouse, Maria set the sapling inside an old water bucket filled with packed dirt. The tree leaned toward the left, stubborn as any mule, but she smiled anyway. It's perfect, she whispered. The boys decorated it with shaped scrap stars cut from tin, slivers of dried apple strung with twine, tiny bows made from cloth ribbons. Marco even added the smooth river stone he'd kept in his pocket since they left Saints Crossing. A humble tree, but a warm one. Then came the baking. Maria stirred flour and lard into a bowl, adding only a pinch of ginger and a spoon of sugar. It wasn't much, but the scent filled the bunkhouse with a sense of home she hadn't known in years. The boys rolled the dough with a bottle, cutting misshapen stars and horses with a tin cup. When the first batch came out burnt at the edges, but sweet-smelling, Mateo clapped and said, Mr. Red Horse is gonna smile, Mama. Maria froze for a moment. Maybe, she whispered. If not, that's all right too. But deep in her heart, she hoped. By the time dusk crept across the ranch, the bunkhouse glowed with lantern light. The cedar tree shimmered with tin ornaments. A dozen ginger biscuits cooled on a wooden plank. Warmth, real warmth, lived inside the walls. Maria stood on the doorstep, looking toward the main house where a single lamp burned behind one lonely window. Ready? She asked. The boys nodded eagerly, each holding one of her hands. Together they crossed the frozen yard. Nathaniel was brushing down a bay mare when he heard the crunch of feet in the snow. He turned, expecting Hank or one of the cowboys, and instead saw a sight that rooted him to the ground. Maria, wearing her patched coat and a soft, uncertain smile. Two boys clutching her hands, cheeks bright from the cold. And behind them, a warm golden glow spilling from the bunkhouse, flickering like a memory he'd tried to bury. Nathaniel stared. "What is this?" Maria swallowed. "We made something. For Christmas." His expression hardened. "I told you." "I know what you told me," she interrupted softly, not stepping back. "And I know why you told me. But your past is killing your present, Nathaniel. No man deserves to live in a darkness he didn't choose." He felt his breath stick in his chest. "Mama made a tree," Marco said proudly. "And biscuits," Matteo added, holding up the wooden plank. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but his eyes fell to the children, two boys offering him warmth, with hands still pink from the cold. Something inside him faltered. "Why?" he asked, voice low. Maria stepped closer. "Because kindness don't hurt no one, and because you looked like a man who hadn't seen light in too long." A long silence followed, the kind that stretched then, trembling between two people who'd both lived hurt lives. Finally, Nathaniel exhaled, his breath fogging in the cold. "Show me." Maria blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. But the boys leapt to it, taking his hands and trying to pull him toward the bunkhouse. Nathaniel let them, though his steps were uncertain, as if the ground beneath him had changed. When they reached the doorway, the little cedar tree came into view, leaning uneven, decorated with scraps and tin and hope. Nathaniel stood still. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared, eyes shimmering with something he didn't have a name for. Memories washed over him. Christmas candles from his childhood, his mother's warm hands, his father's deep laugh, the smell of pine before everything went wrong. His throat tightened painfully. "It's small," Matteo said shyly. "But brave," Marco added, "just like you." Nathaniel felt something break quietly, gently, like a frozen river, finally released under the first warmth of spring. He reached out and touched one of the tin stars. "It's—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "It's good." Maria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time since she had arrived, Nathaniel turned fully toward her. His gaze was still guarded, but softer, like the sharp edges had thawed a little. "Thank you," he said. Two simple words, but heavy as the desert scheme that night. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Redhorse ate Christmas biscuits. He listened to the boys' chatter. He let the warmth of a humble tree fill the cold space in on him. And though he didn't smile, not yet, the winter silence in his heart loosened, just enough for a little light to slip through. Winter loosened its grip slowly in Red Mesa country. The snow thinned to patches along the paddocks, the breeze carried more dust than ice, and the horses began stamping with restless energy. But inside the ranch house, and even more so inside Nathaniel's guarded heart, something else was thawing too. He found himself walking toward the bunkhouse more often than usual. Sometimes he carried a bucket of fresh oats. Sometimes a blanket for the boys. Sometimes nothing at all. Just an excuse to check the hinges, or see that the door latched properly, or hear the boys' laughter drifting through the window. He didn't smile, not openly. But the lines around his eyes softened when Mauricio and Marco raced to greet him. And though he tried to hide it, he listened for Maria's footsteps in the stable aisle, more than he listened for the horses' voices. It wasn't romance yet, not even close, but it was something that neither man nor woman could name, an easing of the winter, a shared warmth, a slow settling of trust in places where trust had once died. One morning, Maria carried a pail of warm water to the trough, while the sun was barely over the horizon. Nathaniel was there already, checking the fence posts. She paused, brushing a stray lock of hair away from her face. "You're up early," she offered softly. "Been up since 3, he replied, hammering a nail. Wind tore loose a panel on the north end. Maria nodded, then took a breath as though fearing courage. "I wanted to thank you for letting the boys share Christmas with you. It meant more than you know." Nathaniel didn't look at her right away, his hands stilled on the post. "It wasn't Christmas," he said gruffly. Maria tilted her head with a faint smile. "It was something close." His shoulders eased. He didn't argue. They stood there in a stretch of git, the kind that felt comfortable instead of heavy. For a few seconds, Maria forgot who she'd been, and Nathaniel forgot what he'd lost. But peace, she learned long ago, was a fragile thing. Rumors began drifting in from Saints Crossing a week later. Thin threads at first, then thicker, harsher. A ranch hand named Whitman brought the first whisper. "Saw some fellas talking in town," he muttered to Hank as they unloaded feed. "Sayin' Nate's got a saloon girl hiding out here. Sayin' he lost his mind letting her raise kids on Apache land." Hank's jaw clenched. They ain't got business speaking on what they don't know. But rumors had a way of traveling faster than truth. By the time Nathaniel rode into town for supplies, the talk was everywhere. A couple of men at the general store stopped talking the minute he walked in. 2 women crossing the street pulled their shawls tighter, whispering into each other's ears. And behind the saloon, Nathaniel overheard one voice too loud to ignore. "She ain't nothing but a soiled dove," the man snickered. "He ought to be ashamed. Apache or not, a man should know better than taking in trash with 2 fatherless pups." Nathaniel didn't remember crossing the distance. One second he was standing by his horse. The next, he had the man pressed back against the hitching rail. "You got something to say?" Nathaniel's voice was low, steady, dangerous. The man sputtered, "Only speaking the truth. Here she used to lay with." Nathaniel's fist hit the post beside the man's head, splintering wood. "You say her name again, you'll be leaving town without teeth." The man paled. "Didn't mean nothing by it." Nathaniel let him go with a shove. Fury burned in him. Not wild, not reckless, but fiercely protective. He'd spent years building walls around his heart. But now, something inside him was finally worth defending. He left town without collecting the supplies he came for. When he reached the ranch, Maria was hanging laundry behind the bunkhouse. The boys played in the dirt nearby, drawing horseshoes with sticks. She turned when she heard hoofbeats, and one look at Nathaniel's face told her something had gone wrong. "What happened?" she asked softly. Nathaniel swung down from his horse, his jaw tight. "What they're saying in town, it ain't right." Maria's hands froze on a wet sheet. "I figured talk would come sooner or later," she whispered. "Saints Crossing never forgot my past." Nathaniel stepped closer. "Your past don't give them the right to judge you." She laughed to a small, brittle sound. "Judgment's all most folks got, Mr. Redhorse. They see me, and see what I was, not what I'm trying to be." He looked at her, then really looked. The strong set of her shoulders, the quiet determination in her eyes. The softness she fought so hard to protect. And something in him broke open in a way he couldn't undo. "You're better than any of them," he said. Maria blinked, startled. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean every word." Her breath hitched, but she looked away, already wounded too many times to hope for gentleness. "Doesn't matter," she murmured. "Their talk hurts you. Hurts your name. Folks'll think you're a fool for keeping me here." Nathaniel moved another step, closing the last bit of distance between them. "Let 'em think what they want," he said. "Ain't their land. Ain't their life. Ain't their business." "But it affects you," she whispered. "It affects me," he agreed. but it don't break me." There was a long, slow silence as she studied his face, the tension, the sincerity, the anger held tight beneath the surface. "What do I do then?" Maria asked finally. "Run again?" "No," Nathaniel said firmly. "You stay. Even if the whole town turns on us, then the whole town can answer to me." Maria's throat tightened. She looked toward her boys who were watching with wide eyes. "You're a good man, Nathaniel Redhorse," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, but I know good when I see it." And for the first time, Maria felt hope rise, tentative, trembling, but real. Nathaniel wasn't a man quick to open up, but once he chose to protect something, he didn't let go. And now, without quite knowing when it happened, he had chosen her. The news traveled fast across Saints Crossing. Nathaniel Redhorse had returned to the saloon the next morning. Not for whiskey, not for a fight, but for something far rarer, a reckoning. Maria didn't hear about it until midday, when Hank rode back with a clouded expression and dirt on his coat. He dismounted slowly, his eyes finding Nathaniel, who was repairing a broken stirrup by the corral. "They won't be bothering Miss Cortez no more," Hank said. Maria stiffened where she was hanging bridles to dry. "What happened?" Nathaniel didn't look up, just told him the truth. Hank snorted softly. "Told? Nate, you near carved it into the saloon floor." Maria's face paled. "You shouldn't have risked trouble for me." Nathaniel finally raised his gaze, steady, calm, a little tired. "I didn't risk trouble. I stood up for what's mine to protect." Her breath caught, not because of the words themselves, but because of the firmness behind them. The kind of firmness that came from a man who had lost everything once and refused to lose anything good again. That afternoon, the townspeople of Saints Crossing began their long walk to the ranch. They came in small groups, old women in shawls, ranch hands with hats in their hands, men whose pride had melted faster than the winter snow. Word had spread of what Nathaniel said at the saloon. "A person's past don't make him worthless, it just makes him human." Maria Cortez works harder, loves stronger, and stands taller than any man who dares spit her name. It was enough to shame even the worst talkers. Maria stood by the bunkhouse door when the group approached, clutching her apron with trembling fingers. Her boys peeked from behind her, wide-eyed. A gray-haired woman stepped forward first. "Miss Cortez, I came to speak my apology." Maria blinked. "For what?" "For believing lies instead of looking at the truth with my own eyes." Others echoed the sentiment, quiet, humble, sincere. Maria didn't know what to say at first. She had spent years surviving on the edges of people's scorn. To be welcomed instead of driven away felt almost unreal. "Thank you," she whispered, bowing her head. "Truly." The crowd dispersed with nods toward Nathaniel, most tipping their hats in respect. For once, no one dared whisper behind their hands. Saints Crossing had seen the truth, and the truth had a way of humbling folks. Winter settled softer after that day. Maria cooked more meals in the main house. Nathaniel taught the twins how to rope and ride. The boys, brave as coyote pups, began calling him Pa without thinking. The first time they said it, Nathaniel froze. The second time, he turned away so they wouldn't see the way his eyes shone. The third time, he answered to it like he'd been born for the role. Maria saw all of it, the tenderness beneath his roughness, the patience he had with the boys, the slow healing in his gaze when he looked toward the pastures instead of the ruins of what once was. And Nathaniel saw her too, not the saloon girl she once was, but the woman she had become, steady, resilient, kind. A woman who had brought warmth into the coldest winters of his life. The proposal came not grandly, but in the simple, honest way of Western men. The day had dipped into gold, with long shadows stretching across the yard. Maria was sweeping the porch of the main house, the twins chasing each other through the dust. Nathaniel walked up from the corral, carrying something wrapped in a cloth. When he reached her, he set it gently on the porch rail. "I made this," he said. Maria unfolded the cloth. Inside was a small carved horse, smooth as river stone, shaped with careful hands. Not a toy, but a symbol Apache men carved animals only when something sacred moved them. Her breath trembled. "Nathaniel, it's beautiful." He nodded once, then cleared his throat like a man about to speak at a funeral, serious, solemn, afraid of stumbling. "I ain't a man of fancy words," he said, "and I know life's been hard on both of us. But since you came here, the house doesn't echo anymore. It feels like there's something worth waking up for." Maria's eyes softened, shining under the fading sun. "I can't promise to be perfect," Nathaniel continued, voice low, "but I can promise to try every day. For you, for the boys, for whatever future we can make." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple silver Bonde's mother's old ring. "Maria Cortez, would you marry me?" She didn't speak at first. A tear slipped down her cheek, landing softly on the porch boards. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Nathaniel. I'll marry you." The twins cheered and tackled Nathaniel around the waist. He laughed, a warm, surprised sound, the first true laugh in 5 long years. It rolled through the yard like thunder breaking after drought. The wedding was held in the tiny white church on the edge of Saints Crossing. People filled the pews: Hank, Big Tom, Reyes, half the ranch hands, the town preacher. Even Mrs. Cole from the Mercantile, who'd once sworn she'd never step foot near a woman of Maria's kind. But Maria didn't walk down the aisle alone. Matteo held her right hand. Marco held her left. Nathaniel waited at the altar, wearing his father's vest, his hair tied back in the Apache way of honoring ancestors. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel kissed Maria with a quiet tenderness that held all the years he'd lost and all the years he hoped to gain. Outside the church, snow began to fall slow, soft flakes drifting from a sky the color of mourning doves. "It's Christmas snow," Marco said. Nathaniel lifted him into his arms. "No," he answered gently. "It's family snow." Maria stood beside them, her hand in Nathaniel's, her heart full in a way she'd never known. And for the first time since the fire, Christmas came back to the Red Horse Ranch. Not with grandeur, not with candles or songs, but with love steady, humble, and strong enough to warm even the coldest western winter. And so, beneath the wide western sky, their little family learned that love can rise again, even from the ashes of a hard-lived past. May their story remind us that hope rides quietly beside us, waiting to be welcomed home. If this tale touched your heart, please hit subscribe, like, share, and comment, so I can keep bringing you more stories down the trail. Thank you all for listening.